Hey, Cookies here. We're going to be talking about how to heal Tazavesh Solea's Gambit in Season 4 of Shadowlands. So, this first pack is a little overwhelming because we lost this first pull, so I'm just going to wait till we get into the second pull to talk about the important Murlocs that matter, and all the rest are pretty irrelevant. So, the first Murloc that we're going to be paying attention to is the Murkbrine Shellcrushers. And what these guys are going to do is cast Cry of Murgulurgur something Murlocky. And basically what this is if this cast goes off, it is an enrage to everything else in the group. I don't believe there's one in this pack specifically, so we will just look for one. It is the... Oh, there is one. Yeah, the Shellcrusher. Okay, so you just look for the Shellcrusher, and you'll see they usually cast it when they get low HP, is what I've noticed. So there, he cast it, and it goes off. It puts in Enrage. It increases everything's damage by 50%, so it's really deadly. And you can't regularly interrupt it, so you have to use crowd control. So as a healer, that's one thing to watch out for, is you can use stuns or various crowd control to interrupt that cry on the Shellcrushers. And then the next most important one is probably the Fishmancers. So these guys are just going to cast Water Bolt pretty much nonstop. And we just want to interrupt that as much as possible. And if it's not being interrupted, then just be aware that they're going to do pretty heavy damage to the tank with their Water Bolts. So just if there's one or two Fishmancers in the pack, definitely keep the tank nice and healthy just in case interrupts don't happen. And then lastly, but certainly not least with the Murlocs, is the Scalebinders. So you can see me chasing one right here, and it'll actually cast it, but it pretty much dies instantly, but I'll still show that one specifically. So what the Scalebinders do is they're going to cast Invigorating Fish Stick, and if this cast goes off, they place a banner on the ground that's just a new mob with its own HP and everything. And if that cast goes off, it will heal every Murloc in the area for an insane amount. Like it heals like 5% of their HP every 2 seconds or something like that. So it's something that you definitely want to deal with, and the best way to deal with it is, again, just crowd controlling the ability because you can't normally interrupt it. So things like Blinding Light, Hammer of Justice for Paladin. As a Druid here, like it died instantly, but as you can see, I did press Maim on it in cat form, so I was kind of just banking my combo points and not spending them, even though I'm having to spend 5 just to Maim it. Oh, actually, what I do is, okay, so I saw the cooldown of it. Now I'm generating a combo point because I had time to spend them, and then now I'm just waiting. And as soon as it casts Invigorating Fish Stick, I am just using Maim on it, which gives it a nice little stun. And I'm not 100% sure on knockbacks for like Typhoon and stuff if you're running Balance Affinity, so that's something you might have to try. I'm pretty sure you have to hard CC it. I don't think knockbacks work, but I could be wrong. Correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. Cool. So that is all the Murlocs, and they all run away at low HP. So just be aware of that. They will all run around the room, which means they will try to aggro other things and stuff like that. So just be mindful of that. Next up we have the Coastwalker Goliath, which I honestly don't know if we even pull one in this. I'm pretty sure we do. Definitely have to, right? I think we pull it after this pack if I remember correctly. Yep. Cool. So the Coastwalker Goliath, these guys are present throughout the entire start of the dungeon, and they're basically just going to cast Tidal Stomp. That's all that really matters. Other than that, it's just dodgeable swirly on the floor. But Tidal Stomp is going to apply a debuff to everybody in the group and deal a sizable chunk of damage, and this debuff increases the damage you take from the next Tidal Stomp. It only stacks a max of 2 times. It won't go further than that. So this right here, after this will be the most damage that we'll start taking from the ability. So once you have 2 stacks, you ideally kill this thing because the third hit will hit really hard. It won't give you a third stack. It will refresh your stacks to 2, but it's still a lot of damage, especially in higher keys. So it's kind of like a, yeah, that was a lot of quaking. But we do end up surviving, killing this stuff eventually. But yeah, be aware of the Tidal Stomps, especially once you're at higher stacks. That's where you're going to want to use like defensives and stuff, is for those Tidal Stomps. Okay, and then we kill Murlocs for a little while, but it's all just rinse and repeat of the same mobs in the same packs and stuff. Next up, we have these Stormforged Guardians. So these guys are pretty simple. They're just going to cast Crackle, which just shoots a line in whichever way they're facing. Stay out of it. you have a grace period to get out of it once you step into it or once it hits you. And then they just do Charge Pulse, which is just this massive AoE that'll just like one-shot you if you're standing in it. So just stay away from them. Melee, sorry. Melee healers, really sorry. But you just gotta pretty much stay out of their range the whole time, especially if you're fighting two of them. All right, on to the boss. The first ability is going to be Purifying Burst. So this just targets 2 random players. It doesn't really tell you who it's going to target or anything, and it just does a sizable chunk of damage of their HP. So there you can see, I think that was a Quaking. What hit me? Maybe it was 3. Maybe it targets 3 people. I'm not sure. It targets a let's just say it targets a random amount of players and does unavoidable group-wide damage. So Purifying Burst, make sure everybody is healthy, because it can, in combination with some of the other abilities and things that are going on in this fight, it can definitely one-shot people. The next thing is Purged by Fire, which is this like giant line of fire on the floor that you can see that's spawning. It targets a random player. You get notified that it's targeting you. The biggest advice I can give is just get a head start, because when it spawns, it literally spawns like on top of you and it will not lay off of you. And even though the pools are spawning behind, it does damage inside the circle. So it will keep up with you pretty well and do a lot of damage. So make sure you get nice and ahead of it and try to use like movement speed abilities and stuff. And then we have these Vault Purifiers that will spawn throughout the encounter. They do an Empower thing, which will just reduce the damage reduce the damage taken by the boss. So you want to kill these Purifiers as quickly as possible. The main thing you want to watch out for is these Valorous Bolts right here. I think I just accidentally like fast forwarded or something. But the Valorous Bolts will like do so much damage to people. Like right there, if that Valorous Bolt would have went off, that warrior probably dies, because the Purged by Fire also went off at the same time, or sorry, the Purifying Burst went off at the same time, so it can hurt a lot. So interrupt the mobs, you can use crowd control, all that stuff, so as a healer you can definitely help out. And then lastly, we have the Sanitizing Cycle, which I recommend healers manage the console, but anybody can manage the console, it doesn't really matter. So basically you have the console, someone needs to go activate it, and then they see the answer to the puzzle, and you basically just need to coordinate with your group where each of the colors go. So as you can see, it tells you like where they all need to go, and then you pick up these little orbs and just place them where you saw them on the console, but only you can see the console, or whoever clicks on it can see it. So I recommend using this weak aura. You can find this weak aura in my community Discord. We have a new weak auras channel where we're just sharing like all the cool, really useful Season 4 Shadowlands weak auras and stuff that we're finding as a group. And then I basically just run up there, get a really nice head start, like before the ability even, like before the phase even starts. Like here, I see Sanitizing Cycles at 2 seconds. You can see me like creeping towards it. And then I'm just sitting here, click it as soon as it's clickable. And then I just quickly click through each of the patterns that I see, you know, the colors that I see. And then the weak aura just tells us where to go, and we drop off the orbs. And then the fight just repeats itself from there. It's just all the exact same stuff over again until the boss dies. Next up, we have Burly Deckhands here. These guys are going to cast Super Saisin. I don't know exactly. Yeah. And you basically want to interrupt it with any kind of crowd control. Unfortunately, cat weaving, I don't really have anything I can interrupt them with, so it's just going to end up going off. But you'll see them all start casting it here in a moment, and you just want to use things like, again, Blinding Light, any kind of AoE, like leg sweep, all that kind of stuff is super, super helpful, and it does have to be hard CC. You can soothe it afterwards, but because they all have it, I just didn't even bother, because at that point, might as well just kill them. But basically, it just makes them enrage and do a bunch of extra damage to the tank. So that's why we want to interrupt it. Because on hierarchies, it will absolutely like truck the tank if they don't kite, and they have a very long melee attack range. So gonna skip this pack because it's just a giant lust pole. So it'll be easier to just look at this one. So in this pack, we have Hourglass Tidesages, which are gonna spam cast 2 abilities. They're gonna cast Brackish Bolt and Tidal Burst. Kick Brackish Bolt. Do not kick Tidal Burst. Brackish Bolt hits the tank really hard. Tidal Burst just spawns these little whirlpools on the floor. You can just get out of them, and then the cast finishes. So, kick Brackish Bolt. Do not kick Tidal Burst. And then the other mob is the officers, and they don't matter at all. They don't really do anything, so you can ignore them. Okay, and then we have boss time, cap, and hooktail. So the first ability is gonna be hooktail, which you're gonna see me get hit by like immediately. If you're standing behind the boss will cast hook swipe and grab anybody that's behind in a certain radius behind her, and then it picks you up, does a bunch of damage over time, and then also resets your camera settings. So now I'm nice and zoomed out. So I got to zoom back in, and it's terrible. So don't stand behind the boss. You do have a grace period to get out. Like once she starts casting the hooktail, you can actually move out of the way. So if you accidentally stand behind her and then you see her start casting, I think it happens here because I have to like go behind her for this quaking. So here it is, and then she's going to do hook swipe because she sees me behind her, or she, behind her, and then I move out of the way before I actually get caught by the hook swipe. The next ability is going to be, I'm going to rewind it just a little bit, is going to be Infinite Breath. So the boss is going to target the tank with a breath. The tank needs to face it towards all these ads that are to the left that you can't really see off the screen. It's just a tank job, so you don't really have to worry about it. But you can help out by CCing the ads, which you'll see here in just a little bit. I'm just going to let it play. And you can help CC the ads to keep them inside the breath because it insta-kills the ads if the ads are inside the breath. So when the ads aren't inside the breath, like this one here, or they're kind of spread out or they're running around, you can like use roots and crowd control. Orstrel's Vortex is really good, all that kind of stuff to keep them inside the breath or help push them inside the breath. Things like Typhoon, Ring of Peace, all that. And then that's pretty much it. Avoid the swirlies on the floor. Don't stand in the fire. Don't stand in the hooktail. Stand on the sides or in the front of the boss, and then don't get hit by the breath. Let the tank aim it, and then help him CC the ads to keep the ads in the breath so that you don't fall behind. Cool. Next mob is going to be the Devoted Accomplice, which I think we do another massive pull here, if I remember correctly. Maybe not. Maybe I don't remember. Anyways, I'm just going to explain it. So Devoted Accomplice, they're going to cast Reinvigorate, which is going to full heal them if it goes off. It is these guys right here, the Devoted Accomplice. So definitely interrupt that. It's really bad because they full heal. And then they also cast Energy Slash, which just is a dispellable debuff that goes on the tank. So you're going to want to dispel this as much as possible because it can hurt the tank a lot. And I think it just increases his damage taken from future Energy Slashes. So just dispel it on cooldown as much as you can. And then we have the Devoted Ritualist here, so I'll just rewind this a tiny bit because the next pull is crazy. So the Devoted Ritualists are going to cast Hyperlight Bolt, which just targets a random player and does some damage. You can interrupt it. And then they also cast Unstable Rift, which is a pretty much instant wipe to the group or a very heavy amount of AoE damage. But you need to just interrupt it, and then it doesn't go off. So much more important to interrupt Unstable Rift and Reinvigorate from these mobs. And don't worry so much about Hyperlight Bolt. If anything, you can heal it, but if you have extra interrupts and stuff, use that. And again, you can use crowd control and all that stuff to interrupt these things. So that's really useful when you're doing a giant ass pull like this. When they start all casting, here, I'll turn up my sound for a second. You'll start hearing all the bigwigs warnings go off. Wait. Here it goes. That's the noise that it'll make. Oh, there goes another one. Oh, there goes another. Oh, there goes 3. Oh, 4. Oh, 5. So yeah, we're just using like Dragon's Breath, Kidney Shot, like sigils. Like you're just using everything you can to just keep them stunned. And obviously you might not do a giant ass pull like this. I don't know where this came from. This was just a pug group, but luckily we made it out alive. All right, and then we have the Adorned Starseers. So these guys just cast 2 abilities. Drifting Star, which just faces a random direction and does a really wide frontal that you're going to want to avoid, otherwise you die instantly. And then they also summon Wandering Pulsars. And this is just going to spawn a little ad that does unavoidable group-wide damage until it dies. And it kind of just like wanders around the room. So as soon as the Wandering Pulsar dies, be ready to group heal. And then help kill it if you can. But otherwise, focus on healing first. Don't worry about killing it fast. Worry about keeping the group alive during it because it does do a lot of damage, especially on fortified weeks. Cool. And then we have the last boss, Solea. So Solea is going to, let's see, what is she going to do first? She's going to summon assassins. So this just spawns 2 little adds. They do a little bit of damage. And then they also, after a short delay, will teleport away from the boss and do a cast. You want to interrupt it as soon as possible, or stun them, or do something to stop them from casting. Otherwise, it instant kills people. But what you can do, there are some neat little tricks. So as a druid, for instance, you can put Ursul's Vortex down a couple seconds after they spawn. Just give it a few seconds. So just count to like 2 or 3. Put down the Vortex on them and on the boss. And then when they blink away to cast their ability, the Vortex will just suck them back in and interrupt their cast instantly. So it's like nothing ever happened. So it's super, super nice. Otherwise, use crowd control, use interrupts, help make sure that they don't go off. Next up is the Collapsing Star on this boss. So she will summon a giant circle on the floor, and then one player, usually in pugs, it's probably going to be you that has to do it, but I like to have like another ranged DPS do it, so I don't have to worry about it. But essentially, one player just needs to stand inside the circle. It'll boop them out of the circle and do some damage, and it applies a debuff for like 3 seconds to the entire group that just does damage over time. So you just group heal during the Collapsing Star whenever you're proccing it. So there the mage walks into it again, it applies the debuff again, and now the mage is going to walk into it again, apply the debuff again, and you just have to shrink it down. I think it's a total of 5 or 4 times, and then a 5th one will go off at the very end, or you can soak it by yourself. But once it's really tiny like this, you can just let it sit there, because then it will just detonate and apply only 1 stack. Because after a certain amount of time, if you just leave it there, it'll blow up and apply however many stacks are left on it, if that makes sense. There's like 5 stacks total on the Collapsing Star, and you're removing stacks by walking into it. And if you walk into it too soon, or 2 people walk into it at the same time, you remove 2 stacks, which means you get 2 stacks of the dot debuff, which hurts very, very much. So don't do that. Unless you have a lot of healing throughput or damage reduction or something to get through it, but I would not recommend that at all. And then here we go into phase 2. Once Alea reaches 40%, she takes no damage during this. I'm just hitting her here to show you that it's literally doing like 10 damage. You're going to have all these arrows that face between you and other players, and all you're doing is just pointing the arrows through these circles, which are these little like orb things that have spawned, these like stars. Just each player needs to break 1 star. That's the best way to think about it. So try to get to as soon as the stars are spawning and this is happening in this fight, try to get to one fast. That way the rest of your group can react around you and like, go to different places that aren't taken already. Because if you're running around late, then that's when it gets confusing and you end up messing up. And then the rest of the fight is basically going to be the boss casting energy fragmentation, which all the stars that are around the room, she's going to blow up, and they're going to send out these little bolts. You just avoid the bolts, otherwise they kill you. They go invisible through these stairs, so I really don't like being up here. I prefer to stand over here in this little area. I end up marking it just to show you guys. So over there, that's where I like to have the boss, because it's just not... I mean, this worked out fine. It's just I don't like how the stars go like invisible under the stairs, because they can still hit you. Here we have the Collapsing Rift again, so or the Collapsing Star from phase 1. The same thing, it's just a little more hectic. And you just need, the ranged DPS. Here the mage knows that they need to take care of it and stuff, so we're all good on that. Otherwise, as the healer, you should probably just default to doing it in most pugs. I think most pugs expect the healer to do it, I think is the thing that has kind of happened in pugs. And then the boss will teleport in the middle of the room again and do this. So again, you're going to need to run around and see here. I'm like super, super late and confused. And I'm like, oh man, we're not going to make it. We're not going to make it. But luckily, we all make it to our orbs, and that's it. And we break the orbs, and then the fight just repeats. Get another Collapsing Star. You get the energy fragmentations. You got to dodge these little circles on the floor, and then the boss dies. And that's just the repeat that happens after that point. So that is it for Salea's Gambit. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you guys later.